Kenmore City Council is now in session. We are going to recess to executive session pursuant to RCW 4230-110-1B. The City Council will enter an executive session to consider the acquisition of real estate. The session is slated to conclude at 7:25 p.m. So I will see you all over there.
Welcome to all of our guests here this evening. I just wanted to mention or reiterate that the council did move into an executive session to discuss real estate acquisition. They hope to be back at about 7:25 p.m. There, of course, will be an opportunity for public comment when they join us again. Welcome back, Mayor.
We have to wait another minute or so.
Looks like it.
Excuse me.
Trying to move Robin to the space as well. Let's give that. Oh, there we are.
1, 2, 3, 4, 6. All right, that's everybody. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the real estate purchase and sale agreement as presented between Ben Holt Industries Incorporated, seller, and the city of Kenmore, buyer, for the property located at 7010 Northeast 181st Street, Kenmore, Washington, 98028, and authorize the city manager to sign the agreement and take all actions necessary to implement the same.
So moved, Councilmember File.
Second, Councilmember Shrubnik.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Okay, I'm not seeing any discussion. Councilmember Marshall.
Yeah, I favor this motion in order to look into some much needed purposes for housing.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
And were we going to have Kenan talk a little bit about? Okay, that's
We
another.
have questions
Okay.
for council, but
Okay, yeah, I think it's a mutually beneficial purchase, and both to the city, the community, and to the property owner.
Mr. City Manager, we're in discussion right now. I'm not sure if this is the right place for you to chime in. I think we missed our opportunity earlier with questions. Apologies. Any other discussion? Would the clerk please take the roll?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Baker,
No.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Councilmember File,
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay, next on our agenda is roll call. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Certainly, Councilmember File,
Here.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Here.
Councilmember Kugler,
Here.
Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Present.
Councilmember Baker,
Here.
Mayor Herbig,
Here.
all present.
Next item on our agenda is the flag salute. Please join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. The chair would entertain a motion to add an executive session to the end of the meeting after agenda item 13, council member reports and comments pursuant to RCW 42.30.110(1)B to consider the acquisition of real estate and RCW 42.30.110(1)I for potential litigation.
So
So
moved.
moved.
All right,
Second.
Seconded, Councilmember File.
we got a motion, and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, and we still need to approve the rest of the agenda. Unless there's any objection, the agenda will stand approved. Is there any objection to the agenda as amended? Seeing none, the agenda will stand. Now we've got two proclamations. First is for Arbor Day. Excuse me. Whereas in 1872, the Nebraska Board of Agriculture established a special day to be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can be a solution to combating climate change by reducing the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cutting heating and cooling costs and moderating the temperature, cleaning the air, producing life-giving oxygen, and providing habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. And whereas trees in Kenmore increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, I, Nigel Herbig, Mayor of the City of Kenmore, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim April 29th, 2022 as Arbor Day in the City of Kenmore, and urge all residents to support the efforts to protect our trees and woodlands and to plant trees to gladden the hearts and promote the well-being of this and future generations. And we have a second proclamation here. I don't think we have anybody accepting the Arbor Day proclamation. The second proclamation is for Asian American and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Whereas the origin of Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month in the United States dates to 1978, when a joint congressional resolution established Asian Pacific American Heritage Week in early May to coincide with two important milestones in Asian Pacific American history: the arrival in the United States of the first Japanese immigrants on May 7th, 1843, and the contributions of Chinese workers to the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, completed May 10th, 1869. In addition, prior to these events, Filipinos were early immigrants and contributors in many port cities. And whereas in 1990, the first Asian Pacific American Heritage Month was designated by presidential proclamation, and in 1992, Congress permanently designated May of each year as the month-long celebration that is now known as Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And whereas Asian Americans and Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders make our nation more vibrant through a diversity of cultures, languages, and religions, there's no single story of the AANHPI experience, but rather a diversity of contributions that enrich America's culture and society. And whereas we also celebrate and honor the invaluable contributions the AANHPI communities have made to the arts, law, science, and technology, sports, and public service. And whereas Asian and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Americans continue to enrich our region's economy, culture, education, politics, arts, literature, science, and technological developments,
I'm paying attention.
despite institutional and systemic injustices that prevent and limit these achievements and contributions. And whereas the city recognizes that the AANHPI community accounts for nearly 11% of Kenmore's resident population and therefore an invaluable force in shaping this community and its values. And whereas despite the strength shown and successes achieved, the American dream remains out of reach for far too many AANHPI families. AANHPI communities face systemic barriers to economic justice, health equity, educational attainment, and personal safety, in addition to heightened fear felt by many Asian American communities in the wake of increasing rates of anti-Asian harassment and violence. And whereas the city of Kenmore affirms that Asian Americans and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders make our city stronger and our experience in Kenmore more enriching. Now, therefore, I, Nigel Herbig, Mayor of the City of Kenmore, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim May 2022 as Asian American and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Month throughout the City of Kenmore and call upon our community to learn more about the heritage of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders. And I don't believe we have anybody accepting that proclamation either. Next on the agenda is public comment. We welcome our community members to the council's meeting. In this forum, the council does not engage in dialogue with the public. The primary role of the council is to listen. Please use the raise hand feature now if you wish to speak. Guests must address comments to the mayor and city council. The clerk will acknowledge your request and call your name when it is your turn. Your time will start when we confirm that we can hear you. Please state your name and city of residence for the record and keep your comments to the allotted time. We will not split your time with others or reset your time except by express approval of the presiding officer. Screen sharing is not allowed. You can submit materials to the council or clerk in advance. Please do not comment about pending development projects on which the council will make future decisions, as those are quasi-judicial matters, and council members must limit their communications about such matters. This meeting is being recorded. Thank you for taking the time to express your comments. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Herbig. We have a big group with us. We'd like to take them in this order. Sandra Burbo, followed by Elizabeth Cowan, John Peoples, Matthew Halls, Carl Michaelman, Kellen Horde, Patrick O'Brien, and David Morton for the time being. Sandra Burbo, are you with us?
I am.
Stand by, let's get the timer going. Go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. My name is Sandra Bobo. I am a longtime resident and homeowner in the Kenmore, and I have several views on this topic of the new tenant protection regulations. But tonight I'm actually going to be speaking on behalf of another Kenmore resident and landlord who is actually just learning English, but has prepared this written statement. So here goes. My name is Edie Valcheva, and I am a small landlord in Kenmore. I have asked another community member to make this statement on my behalf, as English is my second language, and I get extremely nervous when it comes to public speaking. I was completely unaware of these recently passed tenant protections until a community member alerted me. I then shared with other area landlords who also had no clue. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. My husband, myself, and our two children immigrated to the United States from Bulgaria 11 years ago with only enough money to buy a car. We arrived in Las Vegas, where my husband had secured a job in IT. Unfortunately, he lost his job shortly thereafter, and after 6 months of searching and interviewing, we moved to Seattle, where he got a job offer, but we exhausted all of our funds in doing so. Friends and family helped by loaning us money needed for rent. Through hard work and a lot of sacrifices, we were able to realize the American dream by buying our first home in the United States, a small two-bedroom townhouse in Kenmore. 2 kids, townhome living was not ideal, and after scrimping and saving, a couple of years later, we were able to buy a small house with a yard in Kirkland. We decided to keep the townhouse and rent it out, as my hope is for my son to live there one day. We have put a ton of time, energy, and money into updating the townhouse to make it a nice place for us and a renter. Our HOA dues go up annually, as do our property taxes. If a renter doesn't pay their rent after a few months, we will be defaulting on 2 mortgages. How does this help the housing crisis? There should be protections in place for renters and landlords. If someone like me can come to live the American dream, I think it's possible for everyone. And thank again, that was read on behalf of the Kenmore small landlord, Edie Valcheva. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Burbo. I see that Elizabeth is not with us, so we'll move on to, oh, Elizabeth, are you here?
Well, Elizabeth Cowan is here. Was there another
Perfect.
Elizabeth?
Yes, there was originally, but we'll move on
Oh.
to you, Ms. Cowan. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I am a former landlord from Seattle, and it is because Seattle intentionally left us out of all legislation in the last 2 years and passed wave after wave of onerous legislation that I was forced to sell my duplex on Capitol Hill to owner occupiers. And I wasn't alone in that. 9,400 units were removed from the Seattle market by 7,400 landlords who did not renew their license with RRIO because of onerous legislation passed by Seattle with no input from landlords. We are major stakeholders. It is very important for you to include us in any legislation decision so that you can make decisions that are beneficial both to landlords and tenants. What has happened is the landlords who remain have had to raise their rents in order to buffer themselves against this new legislation and withdraw units from the market. So this has not helped anybody in Seattle. I'll address just 2 points, 2 items that I see that are up for vote. And one is landlords pay for up to 3 months rent for tenants who say they cannot afford a rent increase. Okay, so I bought my house in Seattle in 2004. It cost me about $3,000 a month in mortgage, property taxes, and repairs, things like that. So I took in about $4,850 a month in rents at the end before I sold my house. That's what I was taking in, $4,850. That left me with about $22,000 a year. If I paid 3 months rent, that means that almost $15,000, between 13 and 15 would come out of my pocket, leaving me not very much. I wouldn't be able to pay myself, let alone any repairs. Also, Social Security numbers. That is one way that we can track tenants who may skip out on us. If that were taken away, us landlords by ourselves, we would not be able to track tenants. So I think it's important for us to be able to have the Social Security numbers of our tenants. I guess that's all I have to say. In conclusion, I just want to really drive home the point. It is important to include landlords in any pending legislation. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Cowan. Would you clarify your city of residence for us?
I was a Seattle resident. I still have property in Redmond, but I live in Yakima.
Thank you very much. Mr. Peoples?
Yes, John Peoples, Kenmore. Good evening, Kenmore City Council. I begin tonight by proposing a City Council moment of silence for Texas National Guard soldier Bishop Evans, age 22, who died last week while attempting to rescue 2 illegal aliens, possibly drug smugglers, from the raging waters of the Rio Grande. Wouldn't it be equitable to honor with a moment of silence a man who died doing his job? Wouldn't it be inclusive to honor a soldier who died in service to his country, defending it against illegal activity by foreign nationals? And wouldn't it serve the interests of diversity to honor a man whose final act was one of selfless bravery instead of the usual selfish act of trying to harm others and commit crimes? Well, that would be true diversity, equity, and inclusion. Instead, the council has been misled into the narrow, deceitful kind of DEI, the kind that professes civic harmony, but instead dishes out divisiveness, exclusion, and inequity. In spite of repeated requests to the council and the DEI task force to remove it, I noted this afternoon the racist propaganda sheet called the Pyramid of White Supremacy is still linked from the city's official municipal website. This revolting piece of deliberately targets a group of people based solely on the color of their skin. There is no excuse for continuing to mar the city's experience with this vile content. Please remove it. By supporting it, you smear a good portion of your fellow Kenmore residents and make yourselves look bad by spreading this racist, hateful garbage. It would be so easy to just delete the link and remove all references to this divisive propaganda. Please do so. The diamond of civic health is in work, and I'm hoping it'll be a worthy replacement. I also support the landlords and wish you would listen to them more. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, Mr. Peoples. Matthew Halls.
You're welcome.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can go ahead.
Hi, I'm Matthew Halls. Thank you for the time tonight, Council. I am a resident of Bothell, but I own a house in Kenmore that I'm renting. So first off, I brought this point up last time and it was not discussed during the council session, but I really feel like it's a responsibility of the council to send out a letter to every homeowner in Kenmore with these tenant rights, because as you've heard tonight and you hear repeatedly, people that don't pay attention to Facebook didn't realize all these things were happening and they're now liable for this stuff. Someone can sue them if they don't follow them and they have to pay the legal fees. The other thing I wanted to do tonight, it was brought up on the Kenmore Council that they were going to produce an FAQ. I think it was called Facts versus Myth, to combat some of the fake news and misinformation that some residents are spreading. So I'd like to take a stab at doing that myself. Karina has repeatedly said on Facebook that the council's decisions are final and cannot be overturned. This is a myth. They can definitely be overturned. Several council members have suggested that to help offset the risk of losing income due to a bad renter, a landlord can get renter's insurance. I spoke to my insurance agent, and there is no such insurance that protects the landlord. Renter's insurance protects the renter's possessions. Again, this is a myth. Karina has stated on numerous occasions on Facebook that other cities like Redmond have adopted the tenant rights rules Seattle has done. Redmond and other East Side cities have not adopted these rules. Only Kenmore has adopted all of these. Again, this is a myth. The council has said that the community's arguments are fear-based arguments, and that cities that have adopted these rules have not been negatively impacted. But yet Seattle has lost nearly 3,000 rental properties between May of last year and January of 2022. Those properties constitute roughly 10,000 units in total. Since May, only 27 rental units have been added in Seattle. That is not a fear-based argument. The council has stated multiple times that there are plenty of chances for landlords to be heard in the adoption of tenant rights. There was little to no transparency around these changes, and landlords were blindsided by this. It took multiple arguments for the council to even consider discussing if we could have an exemption for small landlords. Karina has repeatedly promised her constituents she would follow up with facts around her unfound fake news on Facebook. She has never responded to those threads. Again, a myth. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Halls. Carl Michaelman. Mr. Michaelman, looks like you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can go ahead.
Okay, this is Carl Michaelman. I am a business owner owning property, and in the famous words of Karina File, a non-resident. I want to talk a little bit further with what Matt just said. I wrote Karina a file about this fact, email about this fact and fiction, and essentially, what happened was that I asked her if she had a license now to practice insurance. What she stated last week, where the policies will go ahead and cover the landlords, was completely wrong. And essentially, she also said that, flood was covered, and that was wrong. And so I am very concerned the way that she is speaking towards the people, which is not fact. Okay. Again, the problem we're running into is, and I have talked to people even more, that you guys are going to lose tenants. These people are going to, landlords. These people are going to sell their properties. I talked to someone today and he said, yeah, we're going to end up selling. So when it comes to this issue of tenant protection, again, we're back in a really gray area, which quite frankly is rent control, which is illegal. So I would say to this council that they should revisit this. They should think about it. They should find a better way of going things. And I think that when you have a license to sell insurance such as I do, then you start talking about what's covered and what's not. Because what we need to do here is to understand there is even more of a bigger exposure that Council Karina File is putting you out with her conversations of practicing insurance. So with that being said, I know that this council will revisit this and look what's right for the people and not what's right for certain people in the situation that might not be owning a home at all. I want to thank you all and have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Michaelman. Good night to you. Kellen Horde. Kellen Horde.
Sorry, I was just unmute myself here. Can you hear me all right?
We see you and hear you. Go ahead.
Perfect. Well, first I want to apologize for the face paint here. I just got back from the museum, or the aquarium here, so I apologize about that. But hello, members of the council. My name is Kellen Horde. I'm an international baccalaureate student at Inglemoor High School in Kenmore. I'm submitting a public comment today in regard to an ARPA grant request, which was submitted this week by myself on behalf of dozens of students at Inglemoor High School, alongside a letter of support from our advisor at the school and a third letter from our principal. The written request itself has a lot of details to articulate in this setting, but I want to provide a short contextual summary. I'm the co-editor-in-chief of the Inglemoor student newspaper, Nordic News, which has been entirely written, edited, and designed by the students of Inglemoor over the course of its 57-year history. And recently, we earned recognition as the second best high school news website in the nation, and our print edition was recognized as the 7th best in the nation. Over the last year, our newspapers worked diligently to expand its coverage of Inglemoor, NSD, and Kenmore, and we find it highly essential that student perspectives on our local community are promoted, and we've seen how the education we provide on student journalism can facilitate youth civic engagement, foster stronger writing skills among a socioeconomically diverse group of students, and improve academic outcomes qualitatively and quantitatively. But as we emerge from the pandemic, we find ourselves limited in one specific way. Among a staff of 25 students, we share just 3 older cameras, which has had consequences for our ability to teach students about photography and photojournalism. And it'll have a greater impact next year with our larger staff of 32. Online learning during the pandemic hobbled our ability to teach both photojournalism and expand program access to a more diverse range of students. COVID-19 simply didn't allow us to teach our students about this subject, as photojournalism and photography naturally are very hands-on experiences. Even our ability to acquire new cameras beyond the few we possess was blocked by limitations on school fundraisers and the tenuous financial situations of many Kenmore residents who we didn't want to burden with requests for money. Therefore, our ability to visually document our school, our district, and our city has been and remains restricted by virtue of our limited resources, and our mission to educate students on how to pursue the documentation has been restricted in turn. It's for that reason that we're looking to acquire 25 Canon camera kits so that we can equitably give our students the opportunity to participate in our student newspaper. Rather than having to rely on whatever photography equipment students might already possess, effectively in exercise and observing economic disparities, or spending time coordinating complex logistics and camera trade-offs, we hope to achieve a 1-to-1 ratio of students to camera kits so that they can learn about visually documenting our community at all hours of the day throughout the school year. We want to make sure that as we exit the pandemic, our program's not kneecapped across future generations of students. We calculate that to purchase the necessary kits, we'll need $15,000. At time of writing, we've raised $1,355 from requests to individual community members, but a grant from the city of Kenmore would provide a crucial level of support for our program, which we feel would directly improve our ability to provide long-term life skills for our students. These kits would also stay with the program across many successive years of students and ensure that future generations continue to have equitable access to participation. So with that said, I'm happy to answer any questions the council may have, and I thank you for your time with 1 second to go.
Thank you, Mr. Horde. Patrick O'Brien, followed by David Morton, Phyllis Finley, Vicky, Stacy Valenzuela, and John Hendrickson. Mr. O'Brien?
Hi, Pat O'Brien here, Kenmore, Washington. As we know, we're coming up to the deadline on the Puget Sound clean air determinations. I note in reading the notes from the meeting that Cascade Law Group has called the participation of several citizens in Kenmore complaining about the asphalt plant. Well, I have news for Cascade Law Group. It's more than 1,000. And I think it's time to fire them because they seem to have one thing in mind, and that is to give the asphalt plant a pass. So, that has been a terrific waste of money. We need to do what I'd even consider eminent domain. Do what you got to do to protect the shoreline and the expanding density of people living in Kenmore. Your acquisition of the Ben Holt property, that was for sale about 2 years ago for $1.2 million. And now you're paying $3.2 million with no publicly vetted use. And for the Kenmore Village, we had years of people participating, saying, oh yeah, we're going to have a movie theater there, a grocery store there. This is going to go there. And what we get? We got a very large camera store and a place to get coffee and a rejuvenated grocery store. So before you go spend $3.2 million, let's have a civically appreciative and commented on plan. You don't have that. You just spent the money. And the reason that property didn't sell earlier is because you put a moratorium on what it could be used for. They wanted to use it for storage. I agree with the city. We don't need more storage, but to have a plan when you spend $3.2 million is very important. We're going to wind up having Lake City move here with your current plan of low income. This is not necessarily a low income place to go. And we're seeing people living on the sidewalk behind Safeway. We're seeing people move their RVs and their campers with plywood in the windows. And you are making this place into a pig's breakfast with your policies. You've got three different, you've got Mary's Place, you got the Battered Women's Shelter, and now you're going to have Tent City, all on 181st Street. And two of those places have some of the most amazing views down the lake I've ever seen. So you are not making a lot of sense. And I think there should be file sharing and other rules for these meetings. 5 minutes would be appropriate.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Brien. David Morton.
Thank you. Good evening, council members. I'm David Morton. I live near Redmond. Cadman acquired the CMAX asphalt plant in Kenmore on June 30th, 2017. Along with equipment, materials, and some workers, Cadman also acquired responsibility for several violations of PSCAA's regulations. WashDOT tested the plant's asphalt cement binder in May, July, and August of 2017. WashDOT has not tested the plant's asphalt cement since August 26, 2017, almost 5 years ago. A PSCAA on-site inspection report from September 11, 2017 shows that Cadman was using cutback asphalt as binder just 16 days after WashDOT's last test of Cadman's asphalt cement. PSCAA Inspector Hudson's report contains three references to a 25,000-gallon storage tank containing medium curing cutback asphalt that was used frequently for making asphalt paving mix. In PSCAA's public hearing on April 18, we heard that Cadman does not use nor plans to use cutback asphalt. We hope that's true. We also heard that asphalt paving mix is essential for roads, but that doesn't mean that people have to breathe toxic fumes from Cadman's asphalt plant. At the hearing, we heard that frequent VOC testing would cause the plant to make wasted batches of unused paving mix. VOC testing should be conducted during the plant's normal operations. It would make sense to test for VOCs while the plant is making paving mix that will be used for a paving project. PSCAA estimates that this plant emits 2.5 tons of VOC emissions per year. This estimate uses an AP42 emission factor intended for calculating VOC emissions from asphalt facilities that use solvent-free asphalt cement to make hot mix asphalt. Using that AP42 emission factor does not provide a valid estimate of VOC emissions from an asphalt facility like Cadman's that uses cutback asphalt to make warm mix asphalt. Cadman's batch mix asphalt plant is capable of evaporating hundreds of gallons of kerosene into the air per day. By using an emission factor that does not apply to Cadman's asphalt plant, PSCAA estimates that Cadman evaporates only about 5 gallons of VOCs per day. Breathing kerosene vapors can irritate the nose and throat and cause headaches, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, confusion, and cancer in humans. Fume incinerators and fume oxidizers that eliminate over 99% of VOCs are available for hot mix asphalt plants. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morton. Phyllis Finley.
I'm Phyllis Finley, live in Kenmore. If I were to tell the story of the Kenmore Boathouse to someone from out of town, they would surely think I was making it up. I have a pretty lively imagination, but even I couldn't make up this story. Here it is in a nutshell, as I understand it. The cost of the boathouse went from about $600,000 to close to $1.5 million to serve a very small portion of Kenmore's population. Public funds were loaned to the Kenmore Rowing Club. They did not pay their portion by the deadline, so the city extended the deadline. No rent has been charged to the Kenmore Rowing Club. However, they charge the public to use the public boathouse that the public is paying for, but they are not. Yeah, think about that. They've been unsuccessful with fundraisers to pay the city back, but they're going to have another go of it this summer. Repeat, this summer, 2022. The city could institute rent for the rowing club if the fundraising committee is not on pace. That would be now, wouldn't it? Does the fact that one of our council members has been on the board of the Kenmore Rowing Club have anything to do with the arrangement? Or is that just a coincidence? Will this arrangement work for others who may owe the city money now or in the future? Isn't it customary to verify that repayment funds will be available before loaning money? I wouldn't rent a house to someone without verifying their income. What, we just took the rowing club's word for it that they'd pay us back? It's time for the Kenmore Rowing Club to pay what they owe to the city by whatever means they need to take. This is really their problem to solve, not the city's problem. Since fundraising has not and will likely not be successful to raise $500,000, I suggest that the club take out a loan, pay the city back, then do their fundraising to pay back the loan. I don't want to be their lender. I don't want a private gift made of my public funds. The service they may be providing the city with programming is nowhere near commensurate with the amount of interest-free loan we are providing for them. It has been said that you will have in abundance that which you tolerate. The non-payment of the Kenmore Rowing Club's debt couldn't serve as a better example. I have 4 requests. Number 1, that the city attorney provide a public comment as to the legality of continuing to allow the club to default on their payment. Number 2, that the club be mandated to repay the city without any more extensions. Number 3, that the city begin charging interest, late payment fees, and a default penalty. And number 4, that the city begin immediately to institute rent payments by the Kenmore Rowing Club. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Finley. Vicky? Vicky, are you with us? We'll come back. Stacy Valenzuela.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Stacy Valenzuela, Kenmore residents. It's disappointing. A few of us came before the council objecting to the cost of the boathouse when it was $600K and failed to have a public vote. We brought up that it was not on any of the 2019 surveys for park and rec improvement requested by our residents. The cost quickly increased due to the request of who? What? Improvements to over $1.5 million. Kenmore Row Club Board has defaulted after the first year under their board on initial date to repay city funds of $560K, which they stated insurance policy was purchased to make sure that if they defaulted, the funds would be repaid to the city. The city council extended the due date. With this default, the use of the facility should be denied until funds are repaid, and rent should be charged for every month used to date, as well as going forward for each row club. Currently, the city is penalizing the North Shore School District that did pay the promised portion by charging monthly rent to them. On top of that, the public is being denied access for the third portion paid, as well as being on public land. Our residents really do not have access if you have to pay a fee to the Kenmore Row Club that is in default of payment. Initially stated the funds were coming from waterways and walkway funds, voted on bond for sidewalks, but later that was backtracked. Also, currently fundraising efforts of the Row Club seems to be going towards $30 an hour coaching instead of efforts to repay the city funds. I don't understand when or who brought in Popcock to fundraise, but that doesn't eliminate the obligation to repay the city and the public funds. Please take actions for residents to collect these funds. The residents have been suffering for over 15 years and brought forward complaints as well as alerted the city, the legislation, PSCAA, concerns of the violations they saw at Cadman. Industry emissions should not be harming public safety or land, water, or air. We appreciate the support to approve the draft permit with 30 stipulations to bring Cadman asphalt to current asphalt processing standards, continuing testing, and hopefully they will be held to these standards with fines and accountability in the future. Landlord assistance in King County is ending next week. Tenant assistance for evictions already ended. Businesses are closing doors. Childcare spots are limited. Inflation is hurting. A lot of fixed income are barely hanging on, yet the pandemic continues. Lucky are those that have a fair property owner. Too many do not. We desperately need affordable housing, and we need funds to get through as the future is unknown. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Valenzuela. Ms. Grayland, we see you. Go ahead.
Can you
Oh, looks like you're muted again.
hear me?
We can hear you now. Go on.
Good. Good evening. I'm Victor Grayland, and I live in Kenmore. First of all, I support the comments of Dave Martin, Phyllis Finley, and Steve Valenzuela. My own comments will be very brief. I want to thank the City Council for hiring a contractor to manually remove the not plants from the Sammamish River, as I suggested 3 years ago. Also, one of the Environmental Services Manager, Richard Joy, for supporting, and the City Council for adopting integrated pest management proposed by Council Member Karina Kyle, and thank her for proposing. I want to follow up on the climate action plan. I pointed out, although the PSC Green Plan has an extra fee, it is mentioned in the climate action plan. I went to the PSC website and tried to sign up, but the fee was in front. Thank you, Council Member Kugler, for asking for the fee to be met. Helen Hurd, I had a hard time hearing you because of technical problems. And I think you said something about photojournalism at Inglemoor High School, and I totally support you.
Miss Grayland.
Pardon me?
Miss Grayland, I'm so sorry to interrupt. You're coming through kind of patchy. Would you mind keeping your audio on and turning off your video to see if that helps? If it does not help, I do suggest you submit your comments in writing.
All right.
Let's continue.
I've had a hard time all night. I was just going to say, I enjoyed listening to Kellen, but I didn't hear what he said. He said something about photojournalism at Inglemoor High School, and I totally support that. I myself am a former photojournalist in Chicago and a former stringer for the New York Times, and I encourage you to reach out to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Grayland. I do have to say, we could hardly hear you. I suggest you send your comments in writing. John Hendrickson, followed by Carrie Bergstrom-Halls.
Okay, good evening, council members. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to follow up on what I spoke about a couple of weeks ago, which is that, I feel the council is participating in promoting this political culture that's become epidemic, and it's based on public deception and manipulation to promote the false promises of things like affordable housing and a right to affordable housing and a right to health care, because it ignores the reality that no one has the right to another person's labor, and it ignores the reality that the laborers need to be respected and compensated fairly and equitably. So if you don't work, you're not entitled to that. So we need rational and practical solutions to these problems, not false promises and Trojan horses. Our policies should be geared towards supporting home ownership. It is most citizens' only financial defense against government mismanagement of the nation's currency. In Singapore, they have 98% home ownership. We have around a little less than 50. I gave you guys an example of, in our culture, underhanded government that manipulates people and takes advantage of vulnerable people by misleading them. And I used the Treaty of Fort Laramie it was 1868. I gave you the wrong date last time, so I sent you all an email that summarizes it. And it talks about how they manipulated the Indians and they agreed to be on a reservation, but they had the right to hunt throughout the Powder River Valley, from the Platte River all the way up through Wyoming into Montana and North Dakota. But it said, so long as a buffalo may range thereon in such numbers as to justify the chase. I gave you the picture with William Tecumseh Sherman in that treaty, who did the March to the Sea in the South and is known for a total war. And he's the hero, American Civil War hero, but he knew at that time they're going to kill all the buffalo and starve those people, and they would lose the right to hunt and live in the Powder River Valley. You could use that as an example to guard against this kind of excess. The other thing that I would suggest that I personally think is a good idea is April 30th is the day that Hitler finally killed himself. And I think it should be an international day of utopian remembrance, because as bad as Fort Laramie is, look what's going on in Ukraine right now. Look at how China supports Ukraine and North Korea. And in the end, I think these people are just suicidal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hendrickson. Carrie Bergstrom-Halls.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
I'm trying to get on camera and I'm not seeing how to. Bear with me.
Since we can hear you, I will start your timer, but go ahead.
That's fine. Hello again, Kenmore City Council. I'd like to share the realities of being a landlord, as there seem to be a lot of misconceptions, and some of your own council members are on record saying that we are spreading fake news. I've lost count of how many times Council Member File has said fear-based when referring to landlords. There is nothing fear-based in our concerns. This is a reality, and we do have an out. We can sell our homes at ridiculous profit, but where does that leave renters? You seem to think that landlords are making pure profit off their rentals, and therefore they can afford to lose money due to a bad tenant. Until we sell, there is no profit. It's only on paper. And as a lot of people probably realize from the real estate crash in 2008, the profit can quickly disappear. I looked over our expenses last year for our rental. We provide lawn care and regular expenses for upkeep of the house, including plumbing repairs, new smoke detectors, garage door replacement, roof treatment, furnace, air conditioner maintenance. We paid $7,000 last year to have the house repainted, and our tenants were concerned we were having it painted in order to sell, like 2 of the neighbors. No, we were painting it because if 3 or more houses on the cul-de-sac had their homes painted, we all received a discount. Because Kenmore is unique in the fact that North Shore Utility does not allow us to transfer the water and sewer to our tenants, we have to pay the bill ourselves and charge our tenants back, which is yet another exposure if a tenant stops paying. We are still paying the twice yearly sewer hookup fee from when our house was built in 2009. Our tenants are paying what our mortgage was in 2009 without any additional expenses such as property taxes, house maintenance, and unexpected repairs. If you have a tenant that has stopped paying rent, it would only take a few months before most landlords would be in serious trouble. Given all the tenant rights given all the tenant right changes, that is now a real possibility. Without being able to collect a security deposit and last month's rent, landlords are too exposed. I strongly feel this council has over-pivoted to focusing on the low income instead of addressing affordable housing for everyone in Kenmore, including the middle class. There needs to be protections that are fair to both tenants and landlords. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Bergstrom-Halls. Dakota Rash,
Hello, can you hear me?
we can go ahead.
Great, thank you very much for your time, Mayor and Council. I wanted to make a quick comment just because I'm hearing an argument repeated that I find to be a little uncomfortable, in that a lot of landlords are here claiming that renters will be harmed and you should look out for renters. And I want to mirror a comment earlier that I hope City Council is also taking the view of renters and making sure that they ask renters how they feel. I've read tenant protection law and I know how it's done well. And these new laws support prevention of predatory landlording and raising rent without due notice. So I would thank you all for taking up this issue and putting ample time into considering it. And I know we will continue to do so in the future. I would also like to support the comments made by David Morton. I think this is a good opportunity to really scrutinize an industry in the heart of Kenmore that has escaped overview for a long time. And I would urge the city to capitalize on that. This particular asphalt facility is located in a very sensitive ecological region, is located in a very sensitive region for people. And it has had bad acts in the past. The only reason we're looking at it now is because it failed to provide a notice of construction. It wanted to avoid eyes on it. So let's put all eyes on it. And I thank you for making a comment supporting amendments to the permit. And finally, I will also repeat a comment I made at the last meeting because I think it's important about the Kenmore Climate Action Plan. I think the city should be ambitious and push forward its timeline to decarbonize. Ithaca, New York has made a very ambitious goal of decarbonizing by 2025. I think the city of Kenmore should do the same. We need to be doing all we can to stave off climate change because it is going to make everything worse if we don't. Every single issue that everyone came here tonight with will be made worse if we don't do all we can to stave off the effects of climate change. And I know that you all care about that. And I know that you're doing your utmost to do that. And I have confidence that we can tackle this problem together. So thank you for your time tonight and for listening to my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Rash. And one more time, could you tell us the city of residence?
Yes, absolutely. I'm so sorry. I live in Lake Forest Park and I work in Kenmore.
Thank you very much. Mayor Herbeck, at this point, I don't see any additional hands. And of course, right as I say that, I see some additional hands. Stand by. Miss Mooney, are you with us?
Yes. Hi.
Hi, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, council and staff. I just wanted to chime in here to also support David Morton and Dakota Rash's comments. I appreciate the businesses that allowed us on Earth Day to alert folks that came by to learn about the Kenmore Cadman asphalt plant's draft permit, and the deadline is May 2nd to write comments about that draft permit to Puget Sound Clean Air Agency. And that's what we were trying to raise the alarm about. But I think what Dakota Rash just said is wonderful, because yes, we need to scrutinize an industry that has escaped overview. Thank you, Dakota Rash, for putting it so succinctly. It is located in a sensitive ecological area. We are stewards of North Lake Washington. And what we discussed today with some other friends who are concerned about the asphalt emissions is getting together at one of the local businesses on Wednesday afternoon, evening, and writing postcards. So if anybody wants to join, we'll probably be at one of those places that we were at on Earth Day, where you can enjoy the businesses in Kenmore. And if you want to have any more information, feel free to look at the perkinkenmore.org site or ask any of these folks that have been so good to get on council comment, because we write to Brian Renninger, and we have some of those flyers are probably still over at the hangar and at the stoop at the 192 and the Cairn. And please ask questions or come right together. Bring your laptops, your pens, your postcards. We have extra postcards and stamps to help folks have their voice be heard at Puget Sound Clean Air Agency about the old asphalt facility. And they are on the land of Cal Portland. So there's possibility that maybe we shouldn't just talk to the Cadman folks, but also the Cal Portland folks about that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mooney. Dan Troyan, and before you begin, this is a good time for anyone else that wants to give public comment to raise their hands. Mr. Troyan?
Yep, thank you. Sorry about that late minute hand raise. Kenmore resident here, just wanted to follow up on what Mr. Morton was saying. I think the asphalt plant has polluted long enough, and until the rowing club pays their loan, let's close down the plant, keep the boats there till they pay it. That's rather disturbing to hear that about the rowing club. I hadn't heard that the residents of Kenmore have been footing the bill for them, and far more disturbing that a member of the council is also involved with the rowing club. Most importantly, I did want to touch on what I believe Dakota was saying and the issues with these tenant rights that seem to be such a hot topic these days. I think the biggest issue is the exception for small, small mom and pop, rentals, and not having the same rules be in place for individuals as opposed to a large, corporation that just, churns out these rental properties. So as a Kenmore resident, it's no longer an option for me to ever consider buying a rental property in Kenmore. Now I'm going to look into other cities, unfortunately, with these new rules in place. It's not about, screwing over a tenant. It's about having the ability to see who that I would rent to. And I don't think that's remotely unreasonable. As an individual owning one rental property or two rental properties, I understand why that's put in place for a large corporation. But for a mom and pop kind of situation, we just can't afford it. So I just wanted to add that in there. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Troyan. Mayor Herbig, I see no additional hands.
Okay. Next on our agenda is the consent agenda. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Business agenda. Legislative session update presented by representatives from Gordon Thomas Honeywell.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Good to be with you this evening. I am Shelley Helder. I have the privilege of representing the city as your state government affairs consultant. And this evening, I'll be providing a brief summary of what happened during the 2022 legislative session. We'll be talking about the outcome of the city's legislative priorities. I'll touch on the outcomes of a couple additional legislative issues, and then we'll talk about next steps. So the 2022 legislative session was the second year of the state's 2-year legislative cycle. It was the short session, it was 60 days. And the focus of the short session was adoption of the supplemental operating, capital, and transportation budgets. It was a hybrid session with some limited in-person access for the public towards the end of session. Legislators participated both in person and virtually throughout, but public access was primarily virtual this session. I will say that it seems to be that public hearings will remain with a virtual option moving forward, even though majority of legislative activity will return to in-person, that public hearing option. There's been a large amount of positive response towards allowing a public or a virtual public hearing. So thought I'd throw that in there. Democrats held the majority in both the House and the Senate. That was no change from the prior year. One of the most noteworthy outcomes of the legislative session is the passage of the transportation revenue package, Move Ahead Washington. Another noteworthy action is the legislature adopted the redistricting maps. I'll touch on that more in a moment. And then any legislation that was introduced in 2021 and did not pass into law was carried over into the second year of the biennium. And in addition, legislators introduced roughly 1,050 new bills. In total, 303 bills were signed into law. That's slightly less than there has been in supplemental sessions in the past, which is to be expected given that it was partially virtual. This is a quick summary of the supplemental budgets. On the left side, operating budget, that's what funds all state agency operations. The budget writers and the legislature received a really favorable revenue forecast in February, forecasting an additional $1.4 billion for the biennium. In addition to that, they had about $1 billion in federal COVID funding that needed to be allocated. At the end of the supplemental budget, the biennial budget is $63 billion, and they left about $800 million in reserves. Some of the noteworthy investments for local governments are additional funding, really substantial funding for GMA planning, a new body camera grant program for local jurisdictions looking to establish such a program, rental assistance and landlord mitigation, and really substantial amount of funding towards utility arrearages. The capital budget is the budget that funds public and nonprofit construction projects, any construction project that is not associated with transportation. The supplemental capital budget is $1.5 billion, funded primarily through a combination of existing bonding capacity, Federal Infrastructure Act, ARPA dollars, and an operating budget transfer. Some of the noteworthy investments in the capital budget are in housing and homelessness and behavioral health. I'll get to this more in a moment, but there was $114.5 million invested in the Housing Trust Fund, $300 million for rapid acquisition projects or facilities. And then the transportation budget has been the most constrained over the last several years. from not only declining revenue source, but also increased demand on the transportation system and a backlog of maintenance and preservation at both the local and state level. So all that pressure led to the passage of the Move Ahead Washington package, which is a $17 billion package that makes investments over 16 years. The primary revenue sources are a one-time $2 billion transfer from the state operating budget, funds from the implementation of the Climate Commitment Act. That's what the legislature passed in 2021, and will go into effect in 2023. The Federal Infrastructure Act, some increases to transportation-related fees, and then ongoing transfers from the Public Works Assistance Account and the state operating budget over the course of the 16 years of the package. Roughly a third of the funding is dedicated to transit or electric ferries, rail, active transportation. And that's because roughly a third of the funding is coming from the Climate Commitment Act revenues. And the Climate Commitment Act has the requirement that all their revenues have to go towards projects and programs that contribute to carbon reduction or reduce carbon emissions. The remaining 2/3 of the package is dedicated to maintenance and preservation, primarily for state roads, some new highway projects, the state obligation of fish barrier removals, and some backfill of the funding gaps from projects that were initially funded in the Connecting Washington package. Drilling down now on the city's legislative priorities, the top priority for the city this last session, or I guess I shouldn't say top, but one of them, they weren't listed necessarily in order of priority, but one of them was a request for $3.5 million for the 61st Avenue sidewalk replacement project. And as a reminder, this is a project that was on the city's legislative agenda last session as well. And the city did receive a $1.3 million grant from the Safe Routes to School grant program. So this is in addition to that grant. So really exciting success for the city. The one thing that I will note regarding this funding is when the legislature passed Move Ahead Washington, they did not allocate the funding towards projects phased out over time. So as I mentioned, it's a 16-year package. Right now, every project that's allocated funding, there's no time for when it will be available. That is a task that has been left undone, and the legislature does intend to provide a phasing, but they wanted to make sure that that phasing was accurate for the timing of the project and realistic given materials and staffing shortages. So something that we will want to work on going forward is making sure that that $3.5 million is phased in accordance with the city's needs. The next priority is a request that the city had along with other cities and the Association of Washington Cities for local revenue for road and sidewalk maintenance and preservation. So this is a priority that I would say we made some progress on, but definitely has more work to do. This request could be broken down into kind of 3 opportunities for the state to take action on. One would have been direct distribution of additional resources to cities. They chose not to do that. Another would have been increased grant funding opportunities for cities, and they did do that. The Move Ahead Washington package does provide some increased funding towards the Transportation Improvement Board, Safe Routes to School programs, various grant programs like that that the city has historically competed in. And with increased funding, theoretically more projects will be available or will be able to be funded. And then the third option was to increase local taxing authority, essentially, local options. And they, I would say, made some progress on that as well. I think, primary option that is now at the city's disposal Every local jurisdiction that has a transportation benefit district will now have the option to impose 0.1% sales tax councilmanically. Under current law, 0.2% is available by voter approval. So this changes it to allow 0.1% to be a council decision. It will require renewal every 10 years, same as the current authority. The regional behavioral health resources is a priority that we partnered with neighboring jurisdictions that are part of the city's radar program. So cities of Lake Forest Park, Bothell, Kirkland, and Shoreline all partnered together in really raising awareness for the need for behavioral health facility in the North Shore area. Those cities are currently working on a feasibility study to identify what particular facility is needed and where it would go. So we're still in the very preliminary stage, but our request this past session was simply for the state to allocate additional resources towards regional behavioral health needs. And Senator Frocht really responded to this and took the initiative to include within the supplemental capital budget $72 million towards behavioral health facilities. There's 38 million is dedicated towards crisis stabilization facilities for adults. And so that's a competitive grant funding that radar cities could submit a grant application for and potentially receive funding from. As I said, there's 72 million total. The difference between 72 and 38 is the amount that certain amounts are allocated to existing projects that have been identified, or their grant programs for, say, youth, or grant programs for facilities in specific regions of the state that are underserved. The next priority was related to clean air. And this was really kind of taking a step back rather than having a really specific legislative policy. Our request this session was for the state to adequately fund the clean air agency's work so they can respond to permit needs and complaints in a timely manner. We struggled to make progress on this priority this session, primarily because legislators told us that clean air agencies had not asked for an increase in resources, and it was difficult to grant additional resources to an agency when they haven't asked for it. So I think this is going to continue to be an item that we need to be creative and probably go back to the drawing board on figuring out what specifically is the problem and what is the solution. Successful legislative priorities have a clearly defined problem and a clearly defined solution or solutions. So I think that's one that I think we'll need to do some more work on. And then finally, affordable housing. Of course, this is the council's number one goal. The legislature made significantly more investment in affordable housing in this supplemental session. As I mentioned earlier, there's $114 million in the Housing Trust Fund. There's $45 million for grants to local governments and nonprofits to help transition persons that are on state-owned rights of ways and to get them into safe housing. There's a long list of additional investments, but I just thought I would mention those two. I think I will wrap that up and move on to additional legislative issues. So the city has a city legislative agenda, and that outlines the priorities of the city council, which were just reviewed. The city council also adopts policy statements. So these are city positions on policies that the legislature frequently considers. So I wanted to provide an update on some of the outcomes of policy statements for the city. The first is there is within the Move Ahead Washington package new authority for local governments to use automated traffic safety cameras, specifically cameras to enforce speed in areas around parks, schools, and hospitals. Any of the revenue generated from the speed cameras would, after the the administrative cost is split evenly between the jurisdiction that implements the cameras and the state. House Bill 1099 is a bill that was introduced in the first year of the legislative biennium, carried over into the second year, got to the very, very end and died within the last few hours of the legislative session. It would have created climate change as a new element within the comp plan. And it was would have been a timely change to GMA because of the comp plan update cycle that many jurisdictions are doing in the coming year. That bill did not pass, just to reiterate. And so it was a bill that the city supported. So I wanted to make you aware of that outcome. There were 3 bills that passed related to clarifying police reform bills from the 2021 session. The 3 bills, just at a very high level, one clarified that law enforcement has the ability to use all less than lethal alternatives. So that addressed, there was some confusion over certain types of equipment that wasn't allowed. The second is clarification of reasonable use of force in community caretaking functions. And then finally, legislation that defined what physical force is. And then the last item, middle housing, there were many bills introduced this last session that would have, or I guess that were related to increasing capacity for middle housing. So that's duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, ADUs. None of the middle housing bills passed this session. Many of them would have eliminated or preempted or substantially limited local control over middle housing options or middle housing zoning for middle housing. Although none of the bills advanced, there is $7.5 million in the budget for grants to local governments that want to update their ordinances to increase middle housing on 30% or more of current zoned single family. Okay, so this is my last slide, and appropriately it's talking about next steps. I think you all have heard me say before that lobbying is a year-round effort, and so just because the legislative session is over does not mean that our work is done. Over the interim, so the months between sessions, the interim, we will, of course, want to thank our 46th legislative delegation. They have served the citizens and residents of Kenmore really diligently over the last 10 years. I guess all of them have not been in that position for the last 10 years, but with the city transitioning to a new district, it's an excellent opportunity to recognize our legislators' service. And in particular, Senator Frocht, as everyone knows, is not seeking re-election, and so his term will end in December. And then, of course, we'll want to welcome and ensure that our first district legislators, Senator Derek Stanford, Representative Shelley Kloba, and Representative Davina Dewar, currently serve in the first district, that they're well acquainted with the Kenmore priorities. This will be a new portion of their district, so new constituents, and they will be interested in learning what is important to Kenmore. We'll participate in stakeholder meetings. There are rumors of stakeholder meetings around middle housing. So if that is something that comes up, then we can participate in accordance with the city's policy manual or policy statements. And of course, we'll want to update the city's legislative agenda and any policy statements that need to be updated based on council position or policies that have already passed the legislature. Once the city's priorities are identified, we'll want to do outreach to legislators, not only our first district legislators, but also new members of the legislature. And I mention new members because the entire House and half of the Senate is up for election, and everyone will be subject to their new districts. Not only will there be potential changes from new faces in new districts, but there are, as of my most recent count, 19 legislators announcing that they are not running for re-election. So there will be really substantial turnover and a lot of new faces. and not only new faces, but many of the legislators that are deciding not to run for re-election are in positions of leadership or have chairs of really influential committees. So it will create a new dynamic in the legislature in 2023. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and see if there's any comments or questions.
Councilor Marshall.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm so excited to hear about the 61st sidewalk funding. It sounds like it's 3.5 million. We've got that, but did I catch it then? We need to go back to the appropriate agency once we figure out when we need the money or when we're going to implement the project?
That's correct. So what we'll need to do right now, the money is simply in a bucket. The legislature has set it aside. It is money for Kenmore for this project, but it's not specified when that money is available. So we'll need to coordinate with WashDOT as well as our legislators to ensure that that funding is phased in accordance with the city's needs.
Councilor Baker.
So there would be no chance of them snatching it back if we are not responsive fast enough?
I don't think so. I think a more likely case is that the funding gets pushed out so far that it's not helpful to the city because the project needs to move forward, or it delays the project much longer than the city would prefer.
Thank you.
And I would say that I've had a few conversations with our incoming first district representatives, and I'm hoping that we can put together like a tour, maybe a van tour or something during the summer to really show that, show off everything Kenmore has to offer and see what questions they may have and get them comfortable with their new territory, if you will. So
that's an excellent idea. Yeah, happy to help coordinate that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Mr. City Manager, did I see you raise your hand?
No, I just want to express my gratitude to Shelley and Gordon Thomas Honeywell for an outstanding legislative session. They were just super effective in promoting our legislative agenda, and super grateful for the funding for the 61st Avenue sidewalk. So great job, Shelley, as always.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I'm not seeing anything. I want to reiterate what our city manager said. Thank you so much for your work, especially the funds for 61st. That is very exciting, and I'm hoping that we can see that through to completion.
Me too. Thank you all.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is a Rhododendron Park Boathouse fundraising quarterly update presented by Parks Project Manager Rob Sayer McCord.
Good evening, everyone. Hope y'all are doing well. Yeah, we have our next quarterly update from the fundraising committee for the Rhododendron Public Boathouse. And so I'm going to turn things over to Nell Aiello from the George Pocock Foundation. She can take it away.
Great. Thank you, Rob. I don't know why it's so dark in here. Sorry. But thank you for having us. I'm Nell Aiello. I'm the Director of Communications and Development for the George Pocock Rowing Foundation. And tonight I'm actually really grateful. We have some representatives from the Kenmore Public Boathouse Fundraising Committee with me as well. So they're going to speak to some of the progress that we have made. As you know, we've faced significant challenges with advancing fundraising for this project. We've encountered a lack of recruitment momentum for the committee, and we've also faced a general sense of confusion around accountability and responsibility for this debt. And with multiple users in the boathouse, but no one managing entity, we've really struggled with who will be accepting donations for fundraising and which 501c3 to use to apply for grants. So we've really had some challenges. But since our last meeting, we have made progress, and we've made progress in several areas, which some of the committee will speak to this evening. We've made some progress in setting up events for the summer and the fall. We've made some progress in grant opportunities, identifying some grants. We have made progress in terms of setting up a new 501c3 entity, which would be the Friends of Kenmore Boathouse, which Alison will speak to. And we've made some progress in the donor wall fundraising activity, which Patrick will speak to. So I'm going to hand it over to Stacey Auger, who's one of the Kenmore Community Rowing Club members and one of our fundraising committee members, to introduce herself and speak to the events and grants progress. I don't know how to hand it over to her. Stacey, are you on the call this evening?
We do have just a Stacy, no last name. I'll check in with that Stacy to see if she's the right Stacy.
Great. If not, I can give the update.
Stacy, you were promoted. Was that by error?
Unmute. Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I don't know about the video. It didn't offer me that option. Here we go. There we are. Hi. So I'm Stacey Auger. I've been a member of KCRC since 2019. I live in Lake Forest Park. We have been working on events to increase our presence in the community and make that property more publicly available. In June, we are looking at a first birthday party open house. In August, we would like to participate with the Bridge grand opening, and our coach has already contacted the event planner for that. There will be a fundraising aspect to it. And in September, we're going to have a gala light, kind of a recognition awards event for KCRC, the high school rowers, and the Pocock Rowing Foundation support people. That's all good news, but the better news is this. We have found a Department of Commerce grant. It's a reimbursement grant. There's a quick turnaround on it. It's due at the end of May. It is 25% of the total indebtedness up to $1.2 million. We would appreciate some assistance from the city, some guidance with any necessary financial records or documents that might be requested for this. It's my personal feeling that it would be good if all of the entities involved in this project applied. I don't see it as a duplication. Each of us has a very singular and separate function as regards that boathouse. On Thursday, Nell, Rob, and I will be attending a webinar to make sure that this is a good fit for us. But I would like to know that we would have assistance from someone in the city with regards to documents. We do not have a contract for a debt. We don't hold any kind of documentation at all. And that would have to come from the city. If this is a reimbursement grant, I can't ask for money that I can't show that I owe. I think that it would be a really good idea for the city to put together a working group with a member from each of the entities who's involved in the boathouse. Listening to the comments tonight, there was a great deal of misperception about who uses what and who owns what. And I think it's time for the city to work together with these entities and take a leadership role on defining what each entity's obligation and function is. Because right now we don't have that, and it prevents us from moving forward. I'm ready to make money. I need documents, I need a little bit of assistance, but more so I need information on how it was determined who owes what portion of the debt. That's not been made clear to me, and I've been studying this for 2 years. That's all.
Thanks, Stacey. Alison, would you like to give an update on where we are with our Give Lively and 501c3 progress?
Sure. Yeah, sure. My name is Allison Anderson, and I am the board chair of the Kenmore Community Rowing Club, formerly the Kenmore Rowing Club. And I've been helping out with the fundraising committee since the beginning of this year for the Boathouse fundraising committee. So we have recently set up a Give Lively account. And if you're not familiar with Give Lively, it is an online platform for raising money. And so basically we can send out a link, we can text it to people, we can set up campaigns, we can put links on our website, and so that people can donate towards the Friends of the Boathouse fundraising group. And so that's all set up, and we'll start promoting that soon. For the time being, Kenmore Community Rowing Club will be handling those donations and kind of setting those aside and transferring them to the city, however we decide to do that, if it's a monthly basis or as we get them. I think that part still needs to be figured out. And then we've mentioned the Friends of the Kenmore Boathouse. We are in the process of setting up a new 501c3. We have 2 board members who have confirmed. We do need to find at least a 3rd board member. We'd love to have more, just more hands make lighter work. And so once we have those 3 board members, we can register with the state. We can start writing our bylaws and then eventually file with the IRS for 501c3 status. My ideal, end game is that we pay the $560,000 back and continue fundraising for needs that the boathouse might have. If it's shared equipment between the school district and the rowing club, continue fundraising for that. If it's repairs of equipment, if it's paying our boathouse manager, there's always maintenance to be done on all of our equipment. And so that will just be an ongoing need. So that was kind of the intent of creating a separate 501c3 from the rowing club, just because there's multiple users of the boathouse. And so that work should be shared and that fundraising should be shared as well. So that's my update.
Thanks, Allison. Patrick, would you like to give an update on the donor wall, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Nell. Patrick McGovern. I work with Nell at the George Pocock Rowing Foundation. I'm working with this fundraising committee, but I'm primarily an operations specialist. Chatting about the donor wall. The last time we were with the council, we had talked about a project to engrave donors' names on a brick overlay in front of the boathouse. Since we last met, we spoke with the project engineer and the architect, who confirmed that was unfeasible because we didn't want to cover up the permeable landscape there, right? So we've sort of elected to move forward with a donor wall inside the boathouse to recognize our supporters. Kind of our research of similar projects, again, sort of scaling down from, for instance, the Green Lake Boathouse, which is a $6.5 million project, has a much different scale of donor levels, kind of scaling this down to a community with a brand new facility, not terribly familiar with the sport yet. Our projections are a range somewhere around $160,000 to $170,000 worth of revenue that can be generated through this system here. We likely will we will likely not pick that all up in one fell swoop. That's assuming essentially 270 donors. Again, kind of thinking about how many people are using the facility right now. The Kenmore Rowing Club has 71 registrants to this point this year, and the North Shore School District has 125 students currently participating in the sport. So again, right, this is a project that can remain open for a period of years as participants come and go through the community. It's an opportunity for them to have their time memorialized in permanence at the facility. So again, there's a range of donation options between $100 and essentially $50,000, right? $50,000 to be for the naming rights on the boathouse itself and like that. And certainly, obviously, as these things get further down the road, obviously, Rob's input from the city council obviously be appreciated like that. We rely on Rob to kind of steer some of these political elements to that part of the project. So thank you. on the timeline, I guess the timeline on that, the timeline, the sales can begin this summer and obviously continue through the fall. So, and that's in large part due to Allison's work in getting the mechanism set up to take donations. So
that is our update for the fundraising committee at this time.
All right. Questions? Councilmember Baker.
Yes, I believe late last summer, the county council at Rod Dembowski had given the Rowing Club $20,000. I am curious whether any of that money was used or is planned to be used to help pay this down a little bit.
So that money was specifically earmarked for equipment. That's what that grant was for, was specifically for equipment. And so the Kenmore Rowing Club did purchase 2 new shells, several oars that are currently being used. And so that money was not able to be used towards the repayment of the debt.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Kugler.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank everyone for coming together and sharing these updates. I think we're hearing some good news, which is that the committee is coming together, that you found different representatives from the different groups. And I love the idea that you're looking at grants. I think to the extent that the city can help clarify roles, amounts, or provide documentation, I'd really like for us to do that. I don't know if we have to propose that or vote on that. If so, I'd welcome some guidance on that. However, at the same time, given the amount that we need to fundraise, I personally think we do need to look at instituting fees for usage of the boathouse. Just, knowing that most fundraising comes from a small number of donors, and we don't yet have a large population of users or a long history of usage. I just think that will, alleviate some of the pressure from the fundraising group and realistically hit that goal sooner. So I don't know if any of the user groups have any concerns about us instituting those fees, but I think that's pretty much necessary for us to hit this goal of repayment.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. Thank you. It seems to me there was an initial contract between the city and the partner agencies, and usually legal contracts are very specific. And of course, the city doesn't run a nonprofit organization. They have their own board, their own fundraiser, and team or person. That being said, I see that there's a large amount that's left unpaid. I'm very happy to hear there's a plan in place and that's being started. That's good. And of course, it's understood that the pandemic had an impact. Yet I also see that other nonprofits were able to do fundraising in the last year. I want to make it clear, I really support crew and rowing, and I think it's a very vital, important sport for our community. Our community loves this sport, and I really want this to be successful. Yet 2 years in, there's been quite an impact to our Strategic Opportunities Fund that's left it with lines crossing, and it's unfortunate. So I do believe it's time for a fee to be assessed to the rowing clubs for usage. And I do believe we need to look at whatever bond was placed to protect the city's part of the assets of loaning against our Strategic Opportunities Fund. we do have to watch out for the people's use of tax dollars as they're spent. And I hope this is clear that I really support you all. It's just our fiduciary duty as elected officials to be responsible to our taxpayer dollars. So that being said, I'm going to leave it there for now.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the presentations and for everybody showing up and showing their roles. And as Councilmember Kugler said, there are some bright spots, in particular the process to form the new 501 to funnel and coalesce donations. I think that's pretty key to this effort. And I'm hoping that the grant opportunity provides not only an opportunity for some of the money to be realized if you get it, but also it'll kind of, in my mind, kind of force the issue of determining proportionate debt between the various organizations. And hopefully you can do that quickly. That's, fairly key to presumably something on the basis of hours of operation, or even more realistic would be the numbers of participants of the various groups. So I do feel like I completely agree with my fellow council members that if you do or don't get the grant, I do feel like using that framework of whatever the proportion of debt between the various groups as the framework for ongoing essentially rent would make a lot of sense. So I really appreciate all your work. As you know, I used to be involved in the board and then earlier on in the formation of the club and negotiations with NSD. And so I, want to see you succeed, but I also feel a great responsibility to the taxpayers to make sure that what was agreed upon does come to pass in terms of the payment.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands coming up. I want to thank you for, Councilmember File.
Yes, I have that question probably for our city attorney. If I'm sure that this project was kind of safety bonded on our side, what is our backup safety plan?
Thank you, Councilmember File. So unfortunately, I can't quite answer that question at this time, but I can have my office work with Mr. Sarah McCord on that question, and hopefully get back to the council relatively soon.
If you'd like, I'd be happy to offer a non-attorney's opinion or response to that question.
That'd be great. I actually was hoping to work with you and Kay Broussard, who is the critical attorney for my office. But if you want to, please go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. The lease for the boathouse stipulates that depending on how that all parties would engage in a good faith effort to close the fundraising gap, but that if that effort has not proceeded basically to the point where it needs to be, that rent may be instituted to help make up that gap. That's the language contained.
Okay, thank you. So my question is then for my fellow council members, is this the time to move forward with a motion to address the rent piece of this issue. I'd like to kind of feel out how our fellow council members feel about that.
Councilor
making a
Marshall.
motion.
I do appreciate Councilmember File's question to the city attorney, and probably would want to hear back from the city attorney on that before making a substantial decision on that question.
I tend to agree with that assessment also. Any other comments? Questions?
Mayor Herbig, can
Yes.
I just make a comment? I wasn't sure about the format, if I could respond.
Oh, it's okay.
I am a Kenmore resident, and so I do understand the fiscal concerns at play with paying back the 500 some odd $1,000. I do also worry about the rent being charged to KCRC, and would want to make sure that it's also being charged to NSD because we do share the facility. It's not just KCRC's use. But I also worry about the increase in fees that would then have to get transferred to our membership and also to the students at the North Shore schools. I don't know whether or not their school board would just absorb those costs or if they would be passed on to students. And so rowing can be an expensive sport, and I hesitate to make it a lot more expensive. And so I think that needs to be considered as well within the discussion of charging rent. Because we do want to continue to make rowing accessible to everyone in our community. We're working on scholarship solutions for both youth and adults, but you know, that's still a consideration.
Stacy?
If I may, I'm in agreement with Allison in that I think it would be very crippling to our club at this juncture. All of our energy has been put into acquiring new equipment, outreach to the communities, putting together summer camps for youth. We're putting together a youth coach development program and making this accessible to people that it has not been accessible to before. And I really felt that was one of our major goals, was to make this accessible for everybody. And if we you know, start paying rent, that just takes programming money away from us at this point. We can certainly replace that money with grants in the future, but we're just getting started. We're babies. We're not even walking yet. So, you know, I wouldn't want to be short-sighted over $500 or $1,000, and that's really what it comes down to for us.
Councilor Marshall.
You know, at the very least, I just want to encourage you all to put perhaps maybe 1,000-fold effort and enthusiasm that I know you already have, and you bring to this great project to raise the money. I mean, everybody's getting out of the pandemic. Everybody's feeling raring to go. I think the weather is like not bad thus far, and I absolutely honor. You know, I mean, I know how much work you've put into planning the philanthropy and the fundraisers. I'm not here to second guess or anything like that, man. I wouldn't do it in a million years. I did it once as president of Rotary 10 years ago or so in the Great Recession. And we raised some money, but that was because we had these people who, local business owners, small business owners, who've been doing that for years. It wasn't like due to me being president or anything like that. It happened, but it exposed me to like the tremendous amount of work that's involved. But I would still say maybe you could seize like this post-pandemic euphoria and get people to, you know, come out and open up their pocketbooks and raise this money. There's a lot of money. We've never seen so much money in this community. I grew up here. I've never seen this dough. There's a lot of people moving in here with a lot of dough. A lot of people interested in it. I would urge you to get creative and try to maybe step on the accelerator to see what you can do just in a positive way. Thanks.
Councilmember Kugler.
I think fundraising definitely, you know, can be impacted by enthusiasm and creativity and thinking out of the box. But then there's also just sort of back of the napkin math. And in this case, I mean, the community and size and history to me is going to be very challenging for the amount that we're trying to fundraise. So to me, it's not really one or the other. I really think we need to do the fundraising. We need to think creatively. We need to have the enthusiasm. We need the support of the council and the community and the staff behind this. And I think we need to institute a fee structure that still recognizes and tries to build in a sustainable model to be able to support maybe participants on a sliding scale. But I really think we need to talk about both, not just one or the other.
Councilmember File.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with my fellow councilmember Kugler. And this is just all about being responsible with our taxpayer dollars, acknowledging at the same time that you know, this is kind of a difficult situation to be in, but you have all been before us several times over the last year, or twice at least over the last year, and it's 2 years following the initiation of all this agreement, and there is a legal agreement, and there's been a lot of talk. I'm glad to hear that there's some plans in place. It also isn't that difficult to set up a GoFundMe, but it is time to realize a repayment plan or at least a rental fee, because our lines has crossed. We asserted a certain amount of support with the agreement, the good agreement, that there would be repayment. And everybody's had a little bit of a tough time, but there is a lot of money to be had right now, coming out of the pandemic, and with a lot of dollars for nonprofits alone. We have a very vibrant community that really appreciates water sports. And I think that there's a little bit of an underestimate of the support that might be had. So I really appreciate all you do and the great joy this sport's going to bring to our community. But we do have to kind of move forward.
Any other questions or comments? All right, well, I want to thank you for the update. We will be, I guess, hearing back from staff and council on possible paths forward here. But again, thank you for the update, and we will see you in a quarter, if not sooner. Thank you so much. Next on the agenda is a report on asphalt plant draft permit presented by Development Services Director Brian Hampson and the Cascadia Law Group.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Good evening, everybody. As Mayor Herbig said, this is an update on the Cascadia, or excuse me, the Cadman Notice of Construction Permit that's being issued by Puget Sound Clean Air Agency. And just real quickly, before I turn it over to Dennis and his team, I just wanted to give a brief background update to how we've got to this place right now. And so, when we figured out or realized that the Cadman had replaced some parts and pieces of their equipment without a permit, we notified Puget Sound Clean Air Agency of it. And, they required a revised notice of construction permit. So we hired Cascadia Law Firm and TRC as our experts to help us navigate through this permitting process, because it's so in depth detail about the scientific nature of it. And so there are consulting experts. Other than this project, they've never worked for the city of Kenmore, as I understand it. So Puget Sound Clean Air Agency issued a draft notice of construction permit on that replacement parts that Cadman did on March 3rd of this year. And after issuing the permit, they did held a public hearing on April 18th because of our request and the public's request to have that public comment or that public hearing period. And they are accepting written comments until May 2nd. And so we, Dennis and Gail and the rest of their team did attend the public hearing. And so this topic tonight is really to give council and the community an update from what has happened to this point, specifically the public hearing, and let you know what we're going to be doing before or on May 2nd as part of the written procedure. So with us tonight, we have Dennis McLaren. He's the counsel for that works at the Cascadia Law Firm, and Gail Hofnagel, who is with TRC. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dennis and let him explain what we're doing.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Mayor Herbig and members of the City Council. I'm Dennis McLaren with Cascadia Law Group, and Gail Hofnagel is with TRC Consulting. And we did monitor the public hearing, and as you know from our last report, we've extensively reviewed the draft permit as well. Mayor Herbig presented testimony at the public hearing on behalf of the city and did a fine job, I must say. We had a number of citizens from the city and surrounding areas also presenting testimony. And we also listened carefully to the testimony from Cadman and their consultants. And we are a bit concerned that Cadman came in and said that they did not feel comfortable with some of the odor monitoring conditions and asked for relief on that. We are going to be working with city staff on some comments from the city that will be presented to the Clean Air Agency before their deadline on the 2nd. And we see some ways to tighten up the permit, but we also don't want to see them loosen up any of the things that are in the draft permit. We feel that it is a solid permit, that the analysis that was done by the Clean Air Agency and required of Cadman was responsive to what the city requested and what many of the citizens requested. And we do see some ways to tighten up the permit as well in terms of things like you've heard many times comments from citizens about use of cutback asphalt, for instance. So the way the draft permit is worded is it prohibits petroleum distillates in the storage tanks beyond 7% content. And that would prevent use of cutback asphalt, but we think that perhaps the permit could be improved by just flatly saying, in addition to that 7% distillate limit, that there will be no use and production of cutback asphalt at the facility. So other things like requiring periodic testing of the materials in the storage tanks, perhaps a product specification requirement retaining all elements of the odor control conditions in the draft permit, because that was again responsive to requiring monitoring if odors are detected in areas of the city that have been identified as important, the Burke-Gilman Trail, the library, and other areas that had been identified as important areas to do odor monitoring in the future if odors are found. We also think there are things like requiring covers on trucks that are loaded at the facility before they leave the fence line. So there are some things we can suggest to tighten up the permit, and we're going to be working with the city staff to prepare final comments on that. And again, we've listened to the testimony at the hearing. We've extensively reviewed the draft permit, and we're happy to answer questions from council members if you have any more at this point.
Councilmember Marshall.
I touched a little bit on this last time, but I wanted to clarify, since they are no longer going to be grandfathered, can we press that they be required to have the best available control technology that any new facility would have now, or can we not?
So again, one of the elements of the draft permit was a best available control technology review. And the Clean Air Agency did look at the best permits around the country and the tightest limits around the country and proposed best available control technology for this facility. So I think that is an element of the draft permit that is there. Gail, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that, but that was part of the review. Oops, you're muted.
That's correct. They do have.
Mr. Hofnagel, we're having the same issue that we had with you last time you were with council. Your microphone is, not sure how to put it.
Across the country, that's what the problem is. Is that better?
No.
Okay. Dennis is correct.
Okay. Councilmember File.
Yes, with this facility likely to lose their grandfather status, one of the unusual connections with this facility is their expanded use of their barging ability. Will we be able to take a look at that too?
So that was not part of the Clean Air Agency's review on this, the barging element of that. It doesn't appear in their State Environmental Policy Act checklist or analysis around this. They focused on the air emissions aspects of the facility. So that's not something we've really taken a look at, nor did the Clean Air Agency look at that.
So my follow-up to that is with the grandfather status removal, would it impact their barging capability?
So that may be more a question for Don. The grandfathering under the air regulations is now gone in terms of having to meet current standards for the facility. With respect to the zoning aspect, I think it remains a non-conforming use. Don, is that correct?
That would be my belief. I think Mr. Hampson has identified that in the past also, a legal non-conforming use.
Thank you. And then one more question in relation to the impact to notice of environment. I noticed that the heron aren't listed amongst impact, and salmon are not listed amongst impactors. And we have a very real sensitive population of wildlife here in our community. It's not included in the study as identified, and I think that's important. And I'm sure it was maybe a rushed oversight, but I do believe it needs to be included, a recognition of it. Thank you.
We can include a comment about the environmental checklist and whether they missed items in that specifically with respect to presence of salmon and herring. So we'll be discussing it with city staff later in the week.
Any other questions? Comments?
I guess I just have a follow-up, Mayor. So after we meet internally and have further discussions on what our comments look like, we will talk to Rob Carlindsey, the city manager, and see if this warrants another bring back to the city council before we make any kind of comments. And so you may be hearing from us before May 2nd. There's a good possibility.
Sounds good. We appreciate the updates. You know how important this is to many of our residents. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on our agenda was a study session agenda. Mr. City Manager, do we have an update on that?
Yeah, due to the late hour, I'm recommending that we bring Rod Stevens back next Monday, May 2nd. I just want you guys to be fresh and ready to go, and we still have some other things on the agenda tonight.
Fair enough.
And if it's possible, we're looking at a 6 p.m. start time. Is that doable?
Yeah, I'm not sure if most council members were aware that we had a meeting next week until just now. So I could be wrong.
Thank you.
I
could be wrong.
That was listed on tonight's agenda.
No, at the bottom, I guess, if you scroll all the way down, you'll see that. But
yeah.
Hang on, let me just seeing if does anybody have objections to a 6 p.m. start next Monday? Councilmember Shrubnik.
Is the only purpose of next Monday's meeting this presentation? This is indeed the first I've heard that we're having a meeting, and this is now a week away.
I'll need to check with staff in the morning to find out if anything else needs to be on that agenda.
Yeah, I'd rather just push it to a regular meeting date unless there's some urgency. But
I tend to agree. If this is the only thing that we're going to have on the agenda, then I would say move it to a lighter agenda. That's a regular meeting.
Okay.
Councilmember File.
Given it's 9:30 at night, if this is the only thing we're going to push back, I'd rather just address this tonight and move on. I would hate to continue to bump things from our schedule or adjust our agenda planning for the year for our council meetings, given that we've already reintroduced another topic that's coming back to us. So I'd rather just continue on tonight and just get this done.
I already gave Rod the night off. I talked to him a few minutes ago and told him, you know, he agreed he wanted a presentation when you guys are fresh and not given this late hour.
A point of order.
What rule is being broken, council member?
There was no indication at the beginning of our meeting or during our meeting that the agenda was going to be amended or adjusted, and that should have occurred earlier in the meeting.
The city manager reached out to me during the last presentation and offered this as an idea, and I thought it wasn't a bad idea, seeing as it is 9:30 already. So he's not doing this solely on his own, but
I agree, yet augmenting our agenda, it takes a council majority vote. It's a procedural issue.
I'm not sure if this qualifies as an amendment, but city attorney, thoughts? We've skipped over things and pushed things back many times in an informal manner. So
I also know, just pragmatically, not legally, but pragmatically, I believe your speaker's not available anymore. But I don't see anything precluding this procedure. I don't have the rules in front of me. I apologize, Mr. Mayor. And I can look it up for future, but for now, I can't answer that question. I also am familiar that this has occurred previously, meaning if it gets late, it's been pushed and there hasn't been motions. But to formalize, I'll have to look at the rules and get back to you on that.
Yeah, we've never had a procedural issue scooting something to a following meeting. Unless somebody has like a.
We just need, I believe we just need a majority consensus or a vote. And I just feel that we need to move with process. And I'd be fine to move along with process as long as we adhere to the rules we decided to be governed by.
Does anybody object to this being moved to a future meeting? Okay, see no objection. This is being moved to a future meeting. Next up is staff report, affordable housing development proposal update presented by Assistant City Manager and ARPA Administrator Stephanie Lukash.
Hi, thank you so much, Mayor Herbig and Deputy Mayor, members of the council. I wanted to give you just a really quick update. The RFP number 22-C2789, the affordable housing development proposal, closed on Friday, and we received 3 excellent proposals. They are all from reputable and known affordable housing organizations, and so we're delighted about that. And the review committee is beginning their work as of today. So we'll be working on reviewing those proposals and then working through making a decision by May 13th is our timeline. And as you recall, we're coming back in June with a full package, including a selected proposal on June. It's actually June 21st. It was going to be June 20th, but that's now a holiday. So it'll be June 21st, Tuesday. We'll come back with the full proposal for including a partner and the design, and we'll have all of that to show you at that time. But I wanted to share with you the exciting news that we did receive three proposals, and we're excited to begin the work of choosing one. I'm happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions? I'm excited that we have 3 good bids. That's great. Can't wait to learn more about those. Or yeah, it's exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great news.
I ran into I was at a conference luncheon and I ran into somebody who works for one of those 3 developers who was very excited about their bid. So
great. You never know until the deadline. We had lots of interest and lots of questions and lots of attendance at the applicant briefing session, but we were very excited to see the lead. And then
that's great.
They look great, so we'll look at them closely and review them. Thank you.
Thank you. Double checking, no questions. Okay. Next on the agenda, council member reports and comments. I'm going to go in the order that I see people. Councilmember Kugler.
Nothing to report tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
No reports. Do have a comment. I just want to kind of underscore what I think we learned a while back about being careful with commenting on social media, that it is challenging to track for purposes of public records. And so, we just want to make sure that we're not entering into back and forth dialogue. Providing unidirectional information is okay, but not getting into dialogue. Thanks.
Councilmember Marshall.
Thanks. I was very excited to see President Biden visit Seattle on Friday and address Earth Day. Just on the thought of Earth Day in a general sense, I want to urge the council to my colleagues to look at ways that we can preserve what's best in Kenmore of our environment, what's best and what's left of our environment, somehow in balance with all these, very vital issues of housing, of better construction, green construction, of growth, somehow in balance with all those issues. There's no other place in the world I'd live. There's nothing else I'd rather do than sit here and fight every day for Douglas fir and salal and Oregon grape and our ravines and our forests and our lake and our salmon and all the rest of our ecosystem. I know the council shares much of that sentiment, but I'd like to just urge that we keep thinking about it and keep being able to balance it. And then also on our topic of interacting with each other. And I know we all share this as well. Things get heated. Hey, at times I'm going to be heated, and I'm going to probably, I hope not to say things I regret, whatever happens. I may seek to do better in all my speaking all the time, but I want to renew my pledge that I'm going to listen to each and every one of you. Absolutely. Even though we're totally at odds with some important issue, but I want to understand. I want to understand your point of view. I want to appreciate and respect your point of view. I think it's for the benefit of our citizens. I think it's for the benefit of our community. It'll bring the best ideas forward if we truly respect each other's opinions and make that effort. And I just know that the opposite is what we got out of with that former occupant of the White House some years ago now, and a person who was just brilliant at division, brilliant at sowing discord, brilliant at casting stones right and left. That's not us. That's not where we want to go. We want to keep everything in a positive direction together. And I know we can do it. So sorry for the pontification, but I very much appreciate all you guys.
Councilmember Baker.
I have been involved with Sound Transit and trying to move the date up on the building of the garage in Kenmore, Lake Forest Park, and along the 522 corridor. I just don't see the sense in having to wait till 2034 to get a garage and have other projects that are not scheduled to be developed until 2034 and 2039 getting bumped ahead. So I'm working on it.
Council Member File.
Thank you. I really appreciate everyone's comments tonight. I think they're wonderful. I'm going to do more. I want to really thank our community who has come forward and shared their thoughts and opinions and their views so passionately. We hear you, and we try to serve you the best we can. So that being said, I'm really happy to have the opportunity of a free government like we do today. Wednesday is Administrative Assistance Day, and we have an amazing set of administrative assistants at Kenmore City Hall that rarely gets the notice and the thanks and the gratitude and recognition in a kind of ceremonial way of embarrassing and praise. So I want to thank you all for your fine work and dedication. You're always overachieving and serving us beautifully and the city of Kenmore and our residents so well. So I want to thank our clerk and our front desk personnel at the city of Kenmore and Nancy Meehan. You do a beautiful job for us. Really, really appreciate you. And lastly, there's an issue of pride. I would like to raise this topic. There are some interesting issues that have risen that need or should be addressed a little sooner than later. And I'd like to bring that back at our next meeting if there's a second.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
But that's just a second for discussion. We still need some amount of consensus to add it to next Monday's agenda.
Okay.
Looks like we have,
I'm
counting 5 thumbs right now, so I think we're good to add that to the agenda. Councilmember Shrubnik?
So are we meeting on Monday? I mean, what next meeting or which next meeting?
Oh, that's a legitimate question. Mr. City Manager, are we meeting next Monday?
I heard you say you don't want to, so May 9th.
Okay, that'll still give us plenty of time. We have until the end of May to make a decision with pride, so.
I believe one of the issues is kind of a timely application. So I'd like to suspend the rules and address the topic of pride.
Well, we already are in discussion of the topic of pride. We can talk about it. But we're talking about it for the purpose of adding it to an agenda. What specifically, because I looked up we have until May 31st if we want to do your proposal, which from what I understand from our phone call earlier today was to march in the Pride Parade. We have until the end of May to get in that application. So.
Very good. So that's one of the issues is we've been invited to participate in Seattle Pride. Surrounding cities are also participating. It would be nice for Kenmore to join in and represent the city of Kenmore at Pride. And we will be updating our Pride Proclamation, and I look forward to the opportunity to work with one or two of you on that. And should we actually bring back the issue of walking on Pride, there will be some nominal costs that our city manager did feel we could cover, but it would take some staff time to process. So besides that, we have some community interest in a community hosted Pride supported by the city again. And that issue is going to be coming back to us rather quickly. And that's it.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
I have nothing to report this evening. Thank you.
And I also have nothing to report this evening. So if we have nothing more to come before us, Kenmore City Council.
Another executive session? No.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Geez, thank you, Councilmember Marshall. Let me dig up. Jeez, that was a very good catch. Where was?
Same link.
Yeah. So yes, we are going.
Never mind. You have it.
We're going to where'd it go? We're going to go to executive session pursuant to RCW 4331.10.1B to consider the acquisition of real estate and RCW 4231.10.1I for potential litigation. The executive session should last approximately 30 minutes. And because no final action is anticipated afterwards, the meeting will adjourn upon termination of the executive session. I will see you all over in the other room.
I see that 3 of our guests are still with us. The council did just move into an executive session room. They're going to discuss real estate acquisition pending and potential litigation for approximately 30 minutes, at which point they'll adjourn the meeting. There's no anticipated final action to be taken. But now that I do have a hostage audience, I did want to give a quick update that the city council is moving forward with optimizing the council chambers for hybrid meetings. And that schedule has moved forward. And we anticipate to do the installation within the next couple of weeks and hopefully do a mock meeting mid to late May and give council the option, if there are no bugs and no trouble, give the council the option to move back into the council chambers should Governor Inslee's emergency proclamations allow us to do so. Thanks for staying with us. One final comment. I did see a hand raised in the audience. I just want to encourage you, if you have questions pertaining to the agenda, you're welcome to email me as the clerk at awarhall@kenmorewa.gov. And of course, you're welcome to email the entire council anytime. Their email addresses are posted on our website. Welcome back, Mayor.
I'm just going to wait the 2 minutes until we get to 10:18.
Sounds good.
I think I have to wait until the half hour is up to adjourn.
I think you're right.
Points to Elizabeth Mooney for still being in the audience. Just waiting for 10:18 to roll around, Rob.
Okay.
All right, it's 10:18. No further business to come before the Kenmore City Council. We are adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
All right. Oh, good job tonight.
Hold on one second. I'll catch you on Teams.